Дозвольте, що ще раз привітаюся до всіх учасників гостей нашої конференції. Наша остання панель буде англійською мовою, це аж не буде круглий стіл, то я перейду на англійську. So slowly but surely we are moving to the final part of our conference. Even so it's a final, this is the central point of our discussion, is to what extent, if and to what extent, a formula of the UKU could be applied to all of Ukraine. And I have a special pleasure to introduce you our moderator, our distinguished moderator, Adraan Sliwocki, who is known for a variety of the reasons, but just probably, if I somehow may tell it in few words, that Adraan Sliwocki is always on the top. He's in the top 50 or top 20 or top 6 as one of the leading experts and consultant on the issues of the management, economics, all the things, but we're talking about the top in the global context, not just Ukraine or United States, I think that. So and he also authored several books, some of them that were best-selling. And if there are anybody who contributed to our business school and to our atmosphere of the business atmosphere in the UKU, it's Adraan Sliwocki. So, Adraan, if I may, the floor is yours.
Professor Ґудзяк, thank you very, very much. Appreciate that very, very kind introduction. And appreciate one other thing that was your contribution that is critical to the work we're going to do in the next hour and a half. In working with our panelists, we formulated the question, who is the audience for the work that we will be doing? And Professor Ґудзяк provided the key idea. The audience is change agents in Ukraine. These are individuals or teams that are scattered throughout the country, working in companies, working in government agencies, working in nonprofits, working in religious organizations and others. And the challenge is, what can we say to them that can help them in their work? The four panelists and I will wrestle with this by trying to deal with two questions. The first is, what is it that makes UKU unique and enables it to add so much value to its society? And secondly, can that essence, whatever it is, be replicated in whole or in part by people who want to make positive change in the country? I have to issue a very small warning to our listeners. And the warning is, this will be a multi-dimensional conversation. Why? There are two basic reasons. First of all, you may have noticed, UKU is not a one-dimensional organization. And secondly, our panelists come from very, very different worlds and have very different angles of vision. They come from the world of diplomacy, cinema, moral theology, and business. I'd like to introduce the panelists to all of us in the order in which they will speak. Ambassador Robert Brінklі. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us. Ambassador Brінklі has been in the diplomatic service of the UK since 1977. He has served as High Commissioner to Pakistan. He has been ambassador to Ukraine. He has held diplomatic posts in Geneva, in Moscow, in Bonn. He has led the UK's worldwide visa operation and done many things which unfortunately I can't recount, but I'd like to focus on what I believe is the essence of what he does. His job has been the very difficult task of creating effective communication at the emphasis of the boundary between countries that are very different. Different in how they think, different in values, different in culture. That is an invaluable skill. We need it more than ever today. Ambassador, thank you for joining us. Second commentator will be Mr. Kshistov Zanussi, a great director who has made many superb films. What we don't know is that he's made more than 50 of these films. And although it's impossible to summarize them, it's also impossible not to notice certain things. The skill of highly careful observation, the insistence on thinking things through till you get to a point of understanding, and finding highly effective ways to communicate that. I don't know how he learned this magic, whether it was studying physics at Warsaw University, whether it was studying philosophy at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, but we are delighted that he's with us, and we're also delighted that he continues to share that experience, that skill, and that magic as a teacher at the European Film School, at the European Graduate School in Zas-Fee, Switzerland, and as professor of film at the Kshistov Kislovsky Film School at the University of Silesia in Katowice. Mr. Zanussi has won numerous awards. He has co-founded the European Film Academy with Ingmar Bergman. I could say much more, but the most important thing I can say is go to YouTube, watch his films. I did, I love them. You will too. Mr. Zanussi, thank you for being with us. Professor Alloïs Buch. He is professor of moral theology. He is dean at the St. Lambert Interdiocesan Major Seminary in Lantershofen, Germany. Professor of moral theology. What this means is that his discipline, his passion, is the area which is the very center and heart of UKUU, the principles and the values from which the goals and the methods and the achievements of UKUU flow. We're delighted to have you with us here, and also for two other reasons. Professor Buch teaches bioethics at UKUU, and since 2012, he has been responsible for research at St. Lambert's. Research interest and focus include the interaction of religion and society, fundamental moral theology, Christian anthropology and spirituality, the ethics of virtue, bioethics, and contemporary ethical issues, of which we have more than a few. Professor Buch, thank you very much for being with us. Mr. Taras Kicmey played many significant roles, one of the greatest of which was co-founder of SoftServe, the premier outsourcing firm in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe. But it has become more than an outsourcing firm. Through a period of rapid development, not just growth, but development and rapid evolution, it has increased its capabilities to the point where today it competes and competes successfully with some of the largest and most sophisticated companies in its domain, such as Accenture and many others. It's important to understand what SoftServe is, not just as a successful business, but what it has done. SoftServe has provided thousands of highly talented young people an opportunity to learn to excel, to learn to compete, to learn to add value, and to grow. Whether they are programmers or project managers, whether they are financial executives or marketers, SoftServe is helping to build an extraordinary skill base in Ukraine. With Yaroslav Rushchishin and others, Mr. Kicmey was very, very influential in bringing to life the business school at the Ukrainian Catholic University. And although I don't know whether this was in their business plan when they started, but SoftServe has also been a major catalyst and engine in the development and growth of the middle class in Lviv and in every other city in which it operates. I'm extremely grateful to our panelists for joining us today, for being willing to take on such a challenging pair of questions. And Ambassador Brінklі, if I may turn to you first, please, to kick us off in this discussion, focusing on the first question. What is it that makes UKUU unique and enables it to add so much value to society?
Slava Isusu Christovi. Thank you, Adrian, and thank you to UKUU for inviting me to take part in this round table. And let me add my congratulations to Vladika Boris. At last, you've joined us in the over 60s club. Well done. What is it that makes UKUU so unique? my answer is that it has such a strong mission and identity, and we've been hearing about that yesterday and today. It runs right through from the Lviv Theological Academy to the foundation of UKU in Rome, the re-foundation of the Lviv Theological Academy, and then UKU in Lviv. And along the way, there were some very strong leaders who were able to build strong teams and institutions on the basis of this mission. I want to say a bit more about what this mission is. And fundamentally, it is a work of God. It's of the essence of Christianity, to witness to the truth, to serve God and others, and to be together communicating with others. I think it's worth it if I just quote to you what you know very well, UKU's mission. The Ukrainian Catholic University is an open academic community living the Eastern Christian tradition and forming leaders to serve with professional excellence in Ukraine and internationally for the glory of God, the common good, and the dignity of the human person, end of quote. And that mission really does infuse everything which UKU does. UKU is what it says in its name. It's Ukrainian, it's Catholic, it's a university. It's in Ukraine, but it's looking outward to the world. Patriarch Joseph Slipi founded UKU in exile in Rome in 1963, and UKU today strives to be international as well as Ukrainian. It has guest lecturers. It teaches English and other languages. It fosters partnerships with universities in other countries. UKU was founded by the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and its theology faculty is authorized by the Vatican. But it's not necessary to be Catholic to study or to research or to teach at UKU. It is an open academic community, striving for professional excellence in all fields. And the fact that UKU is now attracting the best quality students from across Ukraine is a measure of its success in that. Of course, sometimes there are tensions between the different aspects of UKU's identity. It's faithfully Catholic, but it's also a university committed to free academic inquiry and debate. And as Miroslav Marinovich said yesterday, some people think UKU is too Catholic, others that it is not Catholic enough. I think, for the most part, UKU manages those tensions successfully. UKU is of the church, but it is in the world. That is its uniqueness. Thank you.
Ambassador Brінклі, thank you very, very much. Hopefully we'll get a chance to chat some of these points. I note in particular your articulation of the reality of tensions, the reality of managing them. And I'm sure those tensions will continue in the future, and being able to strike that balance will be part of the success of the future as well. Mr. Zanussi, may we ask you to give your perspectives on this question of what is it that makes UKU unique and enables it to add value?
Well, I will try to do my best. But first of all, I would like to greet Metropolitan, and I'm very happy that I had an honor to be in the Senate of UKU and meet him as a very strong and very inspiring personality. I miss him a lot. He's too far away from Europe, but I hope after the epidemic, we will have a chance to see each other again in life, not only on the screen. I'm not in a position to judge what is the role of UKU in Ukraine. I hear some echoes from some people, and they tell me it is unique because it is free, or is it it is unique because it's not corrupted. That it is a university when you cannot buy your marks. I hope it is true, and I hope this will be a rule, it will be a norm all around Ukraine, but I'm afraid it is not yet. But when I hear this tension between being too Catholic and not Catholic enough, I think it is a universal problem of other Catholic universities. And we must remember that the whole concept of university was conceived by Catholic Church. And many other religions were developing similar ideas, but they dropped them. They didn't develop them. And university is a kind of asylum of free mind, full of goodwill, and the quest for truth. Now, nowadays, we have postmodern doubt about the very existence of the truth. And Christians must remain faithful to the basic concept that truth is existing, is not accessible to all of us, and none of us has access to the full truth. But university is the place where the quest for truth is present and is inspiring. Other universities very often fall into doubt, and they question every existence, very existence of the truth on many fields. So I'm happy that EKU does not belong to this maybe majority of universities nowadays. And I think it will inspire other universities, showing that among the believers, there is place for freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of research, freedom of doubt, but all inspired by the deep belief that there is truth, and we should always strive to get closer to it. Truth's like a horizon, which will never be reached, but we know that there is horizon, and it attracts us. It has a magnetic power. If we lose this belief, we lose belief in our future. And I would like to quote out of memory Teilhard de Chardin, who said once that, it was in the 40s, that the biggest danger of the developed world is not atomic bomb, is no epidemics, is no climatic catastrophe. The biggest danger is loss of élan vital, of desire of life. And we are on the edge of such catastrophe. So the role of EKU is to help people to maintain optimistic and have aspirations, spiritual aspirations, and believe in the possibility of the growth of human being. And it will radiate all around Ukraine and maybe all around the world. That's what I wish you. And I'm very proud that I could, in a very minimal dimension, serve your university at a time when I was in your Senate. Once again, thank you for inviting me to be with you.
Mr. Zanussi, thank you very much. I'm almost in fear of the topic that you opened. I hope we might come back to it a little bit later, but if not today, definitely in the future. In a world in which many actors, let me just say, governments and otherwise, are specializing in the manufacturing of illusion and causing people broadly to wonder about where is the truth and how hard do I have to work to find it. The potential role of being an institution that not only values truth in all of its dimensions, but could be, perhaps the nucleus for a comeback of the truth into human discourse, It a little bit boggles the mind, but it is a really, really important topic to raise. Thank you very, very much. Professor Buch, may I ask you to share your perspectives with us?
Good evening, good afternoon, and especially good morning to the United States.
Thank you.
This goes with my very special greetings to Father Archbishop Boris. My congratulations on occasion of your 60th anniversary. Oh, may God bless you for all what will come and for all you will do in the future for this, for the people of God. Yes, I'm not sure whether I would tackle the issue, but however, let me try to start phenomenologically speaking in two perspectives. First, with regard to the external impact, what seems to be unique? Without, I have got three withouts in this. A, without a too stable financial and institutional framework, in a relatively short period of time, UKU succeeded in becoming a real competitor in the world of higher learning and academic institutions, in Ukraine and beyond. And this by achieving high quality standards in personnel, didactics, teaching, formation of young people, and in publications. B, without too much experience and still being a relatively young player in the realm of higher education, UKU has managed to play a highly respected role in the world of Catholic universities. I think of Fuce and Biuk and so on, and most importantly, to give an audible and convincing voice to the wealth and competence of Ukrainian academic tradition and culture in Europe and in the world. And C, without too many resources, UKU in regard to Europe has taken over a most inspiring role in fostering a profound East-West. And note, this is different from West-East dialogue. Moreover, UKU contributed efficiently in enriching and opening up in quite surprising way the common setting of the scientific community. Namely, since UKU as university with a clear Christian profile maintains close cooperation with excellent secular, this means religiously relatively neutral universities in Western Europe, for which open cooperation with church-oriented partners is by no means a matter of course. And with regard to a more interior perspective, I would like to add two despites. Despite a not too favorable societal and political environment, UKU made it to find its place in the Ukrainian academe, to become even one of the most respected academic institutions, and foremost, to attract most talented students, scholars, teachers, researchers, and leaders. And B, despite a church environment that may be characterized by a sometimes rather reserved relation to the academe, which is not a specificity according to my observation for the Greek Catholic tradition, UKU made it to achieve respect also in the hierarchy, and even to contribute with its expertise to debates and statements about sensitive topics within the church and in society. And moreover, while doing so, to stick both to the church's mission and to UKU's scientific standards. So all in all, yes, one can state that there is quite some uniqueness of and about UKU, which provides many reasons to be grateful and happy, but which also contains a call to stay awake in order to ensure that the positive remains sustainable and to remain sensitive to risks and possible emerging weaknesses. Thank you.
Professor Buch, thank you very, very much. Couple of very, very quick thoughts. I think that the challenge for us in thinking through your remarks is for us to try to articulate what is it that made it possible to achieve this rapid change without all of the things that you talked about, and despite what is it that other change agents have to develop in themselves to achieve the ability to cause all of these things to happen? And secondly, the call to stay awake and be sensitive to risks. One of the characteristics of UKU is, they've gone through many obstacles, crises, and catastrophes, but that is, and they've done it with resilience and believe it or not, with a sense of humor. But that issue never goes away. The world doesn't stay static. Not every actor out there is well-meaning, and I think being able to do this in the past never guarantees or assures doing it in the future, but holding this top of mind, I believe, is a very, very big deal. Thank you. Mr. Kицmey, may we ask you for your perspectives from a completely different vantage point?
So, good day, good evening. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this discussion. Education is very close to me. First of all, my two parents are teachers. I spent 10 years in Lviv Polytechnic University. I'm in IT business that to some level is knowledge-based industry. But first of all, it seems to me, and I count that education should be some sort of foundation for the future prosperity of Ukraine and society. When we are talking about UKU, UKU is young university, but what we see, UKU is extremely competitive. And we can come to this conclusion when we consider students. The students with the best independent testing score trying to come to the university. And when I will be talking about unique features or attributes of UKU, I will be talking from position what could be implemented in other universities, what the best practices from UKU could be leveraged and to share the success to other universities. And about uniqueness, all uniqueness, it seems to me, are based on values of UKU. And I would like to start from moral and ethic foundation of UKU, and to probably to people orientation. I will give you an example. When we just started computer science programs in UKU, I met my friends from one of Lviv local university, and we started to talk about this program. And he told me, I know about your program. I met a couple my colleagues who switched to UKU, and I asked them, what's the reason that you switched to UKU and currently you are professors in UKU? And probably compensation. And the answer was no. Probably compensation is good, but values. Rector invited myself to a dinner, and it was said with such big pride. And this is true uniqueness. The next I would like to talk about uniqueness is global thinking. For sure, Ukrainian economy could be successful only if integrated into global economy. And we need to develop global citizen, young people who traveling around the world, who are flexible to communicate in many countries, and at the same time decided to live and work in Ukraine. And UKU has global roots. It's part of Catholic family, huge connections. UKU leaders have many programs, completed programs with the best universities in the world. And we see that we have many connections, like foreign professors coming to UKU to teach. Today, we have this panel in English language, And it seems to me this global thinking is great, unique feature, attribute of Catholic University. Next is, I would say, agility or openness to society needs, addressing new challenges. Today we talk already about Lviv Business School, and today LVBS we consider as a brand. And more than 10 years ago, I assume it was not obvious decision to open in Catholic University business school. And today this business school is one of the best in Ukraine. The same openness or agility we see when we opened computer science faculty. The same, it's not obvious decision to start this faculty. And as today, we truly recognize this is the best computer science faculty in Ukraine. Yeah, this uniqueness. So the next, I would like to talk about world-class management practices. I was invited and I'm proud to be part of Senate. And being in the Senate, I recognize that Senate is powerful board of directors with the best world-class practices how to manage global enterprises, companies. So we see government structure in UKU. We do not have some government structure even close in other Ukrainian universities. Strategy development processes, budgeting processes, marketing. So I see that there are a lot best practices that UKU can easily share with majority of Ukrainian universities. And the last, I would like to talk about deep integration with communities. I would like to mention, first of all, Druzy UKU. I part of this community. And together with this community, we visited many places. It's London, Washington, Toronto, Vancouver, Australia, New Zealand, Austria. Great community. And we have some sort of win-win relationships. I see huge positive impact on people who are traveling around the world and starting to be global people. And I see the huge desire to be part of UKU and to help UKU to participate in many events of UKU. And as well, this is true uniqueness of UKU. So this is, for sure, there are a lot more, but I just finished on this 5.
Mr. Kицmey, thank you very, very much. What you forced me to do or triggered me to do was to imagine that I am a change agent someplace else, audience that we want to communicate to. And if I were that person, I would basically write down everything you said, point for point, point for point. And then I would say, but it doesn't apply to us for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But then I would think again and say, but it does apply to us. I have to get it. I have to understand it. And I don't like a couple of things about it. I think that world-class management practices is a lot of work. I am not sure I like a lot of work. Or agility means that, I'm very comfortable in how I think and I might have to think differently. So, I won't comment more because we have a second more difficult question to work through, which is, can it be replicated? But, half of me is listening to you and half of me is simulating being a change agent in some other city or some other type of organization. And you got my interest. You have me concerned because I may have to both rewire how I think and work a little bit harder than I used to, but it is a pretty clear and unambiguous pathway. So thank you very, very much. To my panelists, I have been taking frantic notes, even though the recording will be available. because there is a lot of work to do to not just summarize what you said, but to summarize it from the point of view of the people that we want to communicate to. But I already know that you have generated a tremendous amount of pure gold in this task of understanding and articulating what it is that made UKU what it is, and which I think many people understand bits of, but not close to the entirety. So with your help, I'd like to step up to this second, more challenging and more difficult and more valuable question. Can those things, if we put them together, what the ambassador said, Mr. Zanussi, Professor Buch, and Mr. Kicmey, into perhaps a 2 to 3 page condensation and crystallization of it, so that change agents could understand this phenomenon better. The second question is, can what UKU did, in whole or in part, be replicated by other people who are willing to be flexible in their thinking, willing to work very, very hard because they want to create positive change in the country? And staying with our sequence, Ambassador, could I ask you again to kick us off on that second question?
Yes, thank you, Adrian. And like my colleagues, Taras Kicmey and Kshiштоф Зануссі, I'm also very proud to have served on the Senate for a number of years. My answer to your question, can UKU be replicated, is both no and yes. I'll start with the no. For a long time, UKU was the only Catholic university on the Eurasian landmass between Poland and Japan. And in many ways, UKU is unique and is quite different from other universities in Ukraine, especially for its underlying values, as I think we've all agreed. It's a unique product of its place and time, its geography and history. But there's no reason not to have other Catholic universities in the region. UKU has already established its own center in Kiev, which can grow and could be replicated in other parts of Ukraine, given the demand, given the resources. The mission of forming people with Christian values to go out and serve in the world is as old as Christianity itself. In the Acts of the Apostles, St. Luke tells the story of the founding of the earliest churches and Christian communities. There were strong personalities like St. Paul, but the churches and communities lasted, they were sustainable, because they were built on shared faith in God and Christian values. In other words, they were built not on sand, but on rock. Another example is the work of the Society of Jesus. From the 16th century, they founded many colleges and schools. In fact, in Lviv, the main building of the Ivan Franko National University is one of their former colleges. And the school where I spent 8 years of my early life in Northern England, Stonyhurst College, was founded in France in 1594 and had to move twice because of revolution and war before arriving at Stonyhurst in 1793. It's the oldest continuously Jesuit school in the world. In 2012, before the opening of the Collegium at UKU, my wife and I were pleased to take Father Igor Boyko, the first master of the Collegium, and Volodymyr Turchinovsky, who became the second master, to visit Stonyhurst and other Catholic schools and colleges in England to learn from their experiences. So yes, the idea of a Christian or Catholic university or school can certainly be replicated, and has been replicated many times in the last 2,000 years in various countries. What's important is to build on the rock of faith in God and the teachings of Christ. Then the structure will last and can be replicated time and again.
Ambassador, thank you very, very much. I have to say, you kind of rocked my world with one of your examples. I think that they're all valid, but the one that hit me like a hammer was the Society of Jesus, because it kind of points to a time frame of centuries. And what I mean by that is I got my high school education at a Jesuit high school. This is several centuries after the society was formed. And I have to tell you, it was probably the best education I received. So this notion of the foundation on which you have to build, this notion of not fearing replication, because after all, ladies and gentlemen, this has been done before. But then finally, the notion that if done right, this matters not for decades, but could matter for much, much longer, as others have shown, is a really challenging idea. Thank you very, very much. Great, great stuff. Thanks. Mr. Zanussi, can we replicate this thing, or is it just inspiration, period, and nothing more?
Well, replicate is not a very clear notion, because if you want to make another place which will be part of your university and have it in Kiev or any other city, I think it would be great, and you will have a chance to radiate to your surrounding. But I think it was very important what Mr. Ambassador said, the identity. There is a great temptation to be in peace with modern world, which is not Christian. And you make concessions, people make concessions, and try to create friendly relationship, losing their basic convictions. So we have to define what we consider as progress. It is not an obvious thing anymore. It was obvious for 19th century ideologists and thinkers, but it's not obvious today in what direction we're moving, who is progressive, who is not. If we are approaching an abyss, then people who are in front, they believe as leaders that they are leading us into something good, and we believe they are leading us to something bad. So I think it is very important that this university remains faithful to these basic elements of Christianity. And even if they are in minority, if they are not among the winners today, they will prove their values in future. And too much compromise is a big danger. I know some universities, Catholic universities, who are only nominally Catholic. This is not a good solution. And if we think about future, we must have Christian vision of future and not agree with elements which are totally in conflict with these basic values, with anthropological vision of human being, anthropological vision of the society, of the family, of politics. So I wish your university could really radiate, but I wouldn't like it to be diluted in a large wave of other thinking, or different thinking, because then it may lose its quality of being unique.
Thank you. Very, very challenging and very, very fair. I think in talking about replication, actually talking about it on at least two levels, perhaps more. One is the very literal level of, creating other outposts or satellite facilities or satellite universities, which I think is a legitimate question. At the same time, there's another level, and I love very much your formulation of radiating. It may be possible to preserve exactly what you're saying, but by making what you as a unique university do better understood by others. There are others who are not Catholic or may not even be religious, but once they understand what this unique institution is doing and the basis on which that exceptional performance is built, there are many things that they might want to learn from at two very different levels. Many of the things, such as management practices that were talked about that require extra work to create a positive result, can be learned. But to go to what you're saying, perhaps the most important thing for others to learn, even if they, aren't Catholic, will never be Catholic, is the reason that those positive things are possible is because of the moral and ethical and values-based foundation underneath it and the mission that they articulate. So thank you very much both for the warning of be true to who you are, but secondly, leaving open the possibility that by being what we are, we can in fact, paradoxically, more effectively radiate more broadly in the community and the society to help others create their own pathway of helping to do positive things for the community. Thank you very, very much. Professor Buch, maybe this is a question that you don't want to touch, but I would really love it if you did.
Yeah, you called it the more difficult question. Perhaps one could give a rather short answer to this second question. Namely, the more UKU is considered unique, the less it seems to qualify for application. However, to be a little bit more precise about this question, I'd like to remind all of us of some more pragmatic elements of the founding period of UKU. And this in several regards. First, in regard to time. UKU started in a kind of open space for innovative educational ideas, and its founders grasped the opportunity of setting up something completely new and with a profound new value orientation. Second, concerning personnel. Despite educational restrictions during communist times, UKU from its beginning attracted actual or potential leaders, ranging from highly talented young professionals, exceptionally experienced underground personalities and fighters for peace and human dignity, to well-prepared experts from the diaspora, most of whom were ready and willing to contribute competencies, personal abilities, and social expertise, and to dedicate themselves to the university's development. As to the environment and contexts, though at its start, UKU was faced with challenging conditions, its initiators showed a spirit of departure, accompanied by some mood of change, at least to a certain extent, in society as well as in the church. With regard to specific surroundings, there were and still are quite a number of friends, experts, even charities, inside and outside Ukraine, who were convinced of the idea of refounding a church academy and then a university, and who accompanied its development with critical advice, enthusiasm, and trust. And finally, and above all, there was and still is at UKU, with changing intensity, a widely shared common spirit of confidence, innovation, and courage. All in all, one may say that UKU emerged basically and still is fertilized from a kind of kairos. According to biblical understanding, kairos refers next to the appointed time in the purpose of God, also to a moment such as harvest time. This includes basically a gift. It also requires gifted people, sometimes even intellectual giftedness. Hence, in this broader perspective, my guess would be indeed that no real replication of UKU is possible, at least not as a whole, probably not even in Ukraine itself. But lots of the elements that made UKU unique may well serve as paradigms or as stimulating examples for others at other places in different contexts. For example, a compelling vision and mission, personnel that is engaged in creating an academic community full of mutual respect, free of corruption, committed to human dignity and justice, but also top academic standards, a good feeling for aesthetics, architecture, and arts in designing a campus, and of course, dedication to social integration of persons with special needs and talents. In a sense, such elements may be taken up, yes, they may be replicated and can be applied to respective environments, presumably depending foremost on the right persons, who themselves are inspired and spiritually minded and full of great and at the same time realistic confidence.
Wow, thank you very, very much. You know, when you speak about the contest between uniqueness and replicability, that is a paradox we will struggle with. When you speak about elements that can serve change agents if they understood them and began to apply them, the notion of a partial replication begins to come alive. My own question, and I'm not sure that we will resolve it today, but I would like to put it to all of us, because I've learned so much from you about thinking about things fundamentally. The question is, if I am a change agent who at least understands part of this mystery, because I'm more convinced now than I was at the top of the hour that it would be quite a trick to articulate clearly the fullness of the story. But the challenge I put to us to think over the intermediate term is, will change agents who adopt elements in the fullness of time come to understand that borrowing elements is okay, but it will never get us there. And so we may have to take a deeper look at the level below and ask ourselves, what are our values? What are our principles? Not things we put on paper, but things that live inside us. And so, you know, at some point I would love to have that conversation, because it's a little bit like studying Andrzej Szeptycki. What made it all possible was faith, authentic love of fellow man, a sense of fairness. And that was united with extreme pragmatism. But the pragmatism without the first part, I think, could have created a lot of good. Whether it would have achieved the true potential, is a great open question. Thank you very much, Professor Buch. Mr. Kitsmay, in whole or in part, what do you say?
Okay, thank you. So, you know, I wish the UKU uniquenesses could be replicated, but understanding short but bright history of UKU, understanding deep Catholic roots, understanding great global dedicated leaders of UKU, it's quite challenging or difficult to replicate. But I'm not disappointed. I have another good news. I'm glad that UKU can inspire other universities, can show some paths of other universities, how to be successful as well. Today, we see, when we take a look on Ukrainian university, we see that they are still in some transformation from planet economy to new market economy. They are not yet in market economy's position. Still, they are expecting state finances, state planning, etc. And UKU, without any state financing, showing great result and is completely successfully operating in market economy. And learning UKU history, UKU uniqueness, university can find this, let's say, secret formula. What is needed to be done for them to be successful in new market economy, which is for them extremely important as of today, as for me.
Super. Thank you very, very much. I'd like to thank all of our panelists and to leave open an opportunity for a few minutes for any of you who would like to make an additional comment or ask an additional question. And I give you a warning. If you don't, I will speak. Ambassador.
Thanks, Adrian. I was arguing that, of course, UKU can be replicated from the argument of history. Professor Buch was saying there's something very unique about UKU, which makes it very difficult to replicate. I don't actually think that we're contradicting each other. And Adrian, you said that there are different senses of replication. It's not just the question of, are you going to build other universities or colleges, but the whole of the ethos of UKU is forming people who will then go out, whether it's into business or journalism or government or NGOs, carrying with them that set of values, inculcated with the values, which will enable them to change the world they're in, whatever part of that world it is. So I think that is also a very important way in which, at least in part, UKU is replicated by its products, by its alumni.
Brilliant, thank you. You know, one of the things that enabled the university to step on the path of creating programs that attracted the best was spending a lot of time thinking about successful universities and asking the question, who are their alumni? And when you ask that question, you immediately see that, you know, for some there's tremendous wealth, which enables doing, you know, a lot of things, building museums, et cetera, et cetera. You ask the question differently. Now imagine the alumni group in a decade, 2 decades, or 3 decades, who, you know, may or may not have created a lot of wealth. Some will not have. But if there is a set of ideas and ethos, as you describe it, that they take with them wherever they go, that ethos and that essence of what UKU is can create a dramatic impact over the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4. And thinking about that is extremely valuable and challenging, because you're looking for students who are great, but who have some sense of character and who want to develop that character because they see their future not as being successful in conventional terms, but as making something happen that's valuable to other people as well. So thank you very much. Big, big point to put into this conversation. Okay. Yes, Mr. Zanussi, please.
If I may, because talking about this multiplication as a possibility, I think we neglect a very simple fact that most universities nowadays consider that the distinction between faith and reason is an absolute distinction. So there is no room for faith when reason is a God. and Catholic university, Christian university, must be different. So it will be always in collision with universities that deny spiritual dimension and say, this is not our business, we don't talk about it. Without spiritual dimension, ethical dimension is not very well anchored, it's not very well grounded, we know it. There is lay ethics, but it is always somehow floating. So this will be one point why I don't believe that this university can join some other university, be close to it. It will always be tension, because there is something very unique in Christian concept of unity between faith and reason, and the lay world is talking about reason alone. The other thing, which I think France is a good example, is fact that very good, very elitist schools lose their moral, ethical dimension. That's what President Macron pointed out, that very well-educated people who have no set of values are useless in the administration. So university that has this perspective of spirituality is offering some basis for ethical choices. And that's why I'm more attached to the concept that ECU must remain unique and radiate, but not replicate.
Mr. Zanussi, you touch on a favorite topic of mine, which has not been fully developed, but I think we will. If anyone ever asked themselves the true cost of the absence of ethics, they would be horrified. In government, in education, in business, etc. And when you say that, lay ethics is a little bit weak, I take what you say, I understand it, and I put to us the challenge, well, I would call it the Macron challenge. There's no use for these people in government. Why? What is the reason? And people tend not to think of the systemic effects of ethics. They just don't. And when you start doing that, when you start looking not at the short term, but at the long term, when you start looking not at the transaction, but the entire system, all sorts of things become much, much clearer. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Zanussi, on that one. Any others before I take over the microphone? Mr. Kицmei, please.
Yes, when we were talking about uniqueness and replication, we talk a little about future, whether it's possible in the future. But I would like to say that we have good examples that already implemented this secret formula already in local universities. And I'm from IT, and I see that after we started computer science department in UKU, we used literally almost the same framework to develop similar programs in other Lviv universities. And I see how values moved from UKU to other university. Values of open conversation about new programs, selecting teachers, and step by step, I see how these values started to be used in other universities in Lviv. And these days, nowadays, currently working with one key university to set up some sort of computer science program. And what I'm pushing to use the same framework I've been using for Catholic University, step by step to implement the same process. So now we have cool result already.
Super. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, because, if our purpose is to accurately tell the history and accurately to identify at least elements that one can learn from, this initial set of examples of things working in other environments. As a change agent, it is great to know a story. And then I look at you and say, yes, but it's never worked anywhere else. And then you say, well, not so fast.
Yes.
Give that as part of the curriculum and the agenda. Okay, thank you. To all the panelists, a very, very warm felt thank you. There was good news in what you said. There was bad news in what you said. There were many challenging things, which is why we invited you in the first place. We have a lot to work through, but this is perhaps one of the most important things that the Ukrainian Catholic University will do. We have just a few more minutes, so I made the decision not to open with what I wanted to say, but to open with you. Why even very successful organizations, if they speak too much about themselves inside and don't open all the windows to get the blast of external perspective, will always run into trouble. We've seen this dozens of times in the last several decades with corporate organizations, nonprofit, religious. So what you have said to us is literally invaluable. But I'd like to take just a few minutes to put it in context with part of the internal conversation. So in order to be serious about this issue of communicating about UKUU and wrestling with this difficult question of replicability, there is some internal work that is being done that I thought you might find interesting. And this internal work is about going back to the beginning, going back to the first 2 or 3 years, when, believe me, and as many of you know, things looked very, very different. And you talk to the people who worked there, and this is not external view, this is internal view, to try to find out what happened when the spiritual and cultural DNA of this institution was being formed. And there are 4 quick things. You talk to one of the early workers and they say to you, conversations with Vladika Boris, although he wasn't Vladika at the time, are kind of funny. We live in an instrumental age. People aren't employees, they are assets. Customers aren't people, they are target audiences or target accounts. And they would say, conversations with Vladika felt like he was talking to you as if you were a person. And then you realized he was talking to you as if you were a person. And you found that to be a strange experience because it didn't happen that often, and B, you found it to be contagious because then you started treating other people that way. Secondly, many of the people who worked there in the early days did not have a lot of experience, and there were a lot of difficult tasks to be done. And so there was fear, will I fail? And yet the task was done, and there was a failure. However, instead of the hammer of wrath coming down, there was a conversation. What happened? How did we go about it? How might we do it differently? And then it was done again, and there was still failure, but less failure. And then it was done again, and it worked. And when you talk to the person who went through this process, they would say, you cannot believe the level of trust that created. And you cannot believe how my skills and my confidence grew as a result of that process. Third thing, another person would say, my strange experience with Vladika Boris is we have a conversation and I'd talk, and I noticed that he was listening. How did I notice? Because, it doesn't happen that often. A client once told me nobody listens during a meeting because they think about the presentation that they're going to give. Well, you take and you multiply that to normal relationships. And I am totally fascinated when I'm talking about my problems, but as soon as you talk about your problems, my attention plummets. And this notion of listening was also contagious, but very interesting thing happened. People said, when I started to listen to the words, to the facial expressions, to the body language, to the emotions behind the words, I found that to be a very, very difficult skill to develop. I knew I had to do it, but it was much, much harder than I thought. But I also knew that if I didn't master that skill, I would be making many wrong decisions. I would not be doing my job the way I need to do it. There are many, many others about humor, about crisis that we could talk about, but I'll end one which was like a real, punch in the face in terms of experience. This was probably 2 decades ago, 2.5. There was a dinner in the United States, several people at a table, wonderful dinner. Vladika talked about UKU. You would think there's not much to talk about because it was early, but he talked about what was there, what was planned, what was the future. And at the end of it, somebody at the table said, "How can we help you?" And all of us were expecting to hear, donate, and donate as much as you can, because in our world, we're programmed to expect that. And we didn't hear that. We heard, "Please come visit us," period, full stop, full end of sentence, full end of dinner. And it was in that moment that I understood for the first time the difference between consummating a transaction, between closing a deal and inviting somebody into a relationship that could last for decades. And in fact, all the people at that table did get into a relationship that lasted for decades. Why am I talking about this? For 2 reasons. What you said to us today and the level at which you spoke was tremendously, tremendously important. It is one component. There are other components being worked on, and this is a flavor of one of the other components, and it has a couple of characteristics. If I'm a change agent and I want to learn from UKU, A, I sort of have to know these things, and B, I sort of have to develop an appreciation of how difficult they are, and C, I have to ask myself, what are the values that are underneath this kind of unconventional behavior? So to our panelists, thank you. To the team at UKU that is pulling together these threads of how this all got started in the first few years and at least partially helps to explain the survivability, the viability, the speed with which this competitiveness was achieved. And now I would love to turn to our beloved Vladika and say, we did our best. Please let us know what you think.
Wow, Adrian, thank you. Thank you. I think a lot. I hope that this discussion is published both as a video and audio, but also in text form. First of all, I want to thank you, Adrian, and all the panelists for agreeing to do this. As you know, this was a surprise for me until about 2 days ago. And I'm deeply moved. I'm deeply moved because I have tremendous respect for you, and I've learned a lot from you. Adraian Sliwocki, I met for the first time almost 43 years ago. It was late winter. I was a senior in high school. And I can place it and remember the time because it was after college application. And Adrian had come on behalf of the Ukrainian Studies Fund to Syracuse, New York, and he stayed over at our house because my father raised money in the community. But Adrian was one of the central team, and he was a student at Harvard. I don't know in which school in the winter of '78 was that. That was past undergrad, whether it was business or law school.
Business school.
Business school. And I remember because I had applied for Harvard as an undergraduate, and Adrian said, "You should have talked to us. We could help you do it." And that was great to hear. And of course, I couldn't forget it because I was rejected by Harvard. I didn't have enough help. I didn't get in as an undergraduate. but
I think you did okay. I think you did okay.
no, I'm just speaking about the dates. Anyway, it and from that time, I don't know if many people know, my parents, when they came off the boat and landed as immigrants, my mother worked with both Adrian's father and mother in a chocolate. They put chocolate in boxes and tied the ribbons around boxes. This, we're talking about 1950, 1952, somewhere around there. And so there's a very deep connection, which is transgenerational, not to speak of all the help that Adrian has given us. I have seen more movies of professors done by Professor Zanussi than any other film director, because you gave me your movies. I really think you're incredibly unique. What most people here don't realize is that Professor Zanussi could give the talk he gave just now, not only in his native Polish and English, as we heard, but he can do it in Russian, French, Italian, and German, at least. There's, besides Ihor Shevchenko, I don't know, other polyglots like that. And I think from everything we heard, you could see the depth and the principle. In the previous session, I spoke about death. Kshistov Zanussi has really gone deeply in the topic of death in his movies, from a Christian point of view. Alоїс Бух probably knows about the development of UKU more than just about anybody, because the first time he came was in June of 1993, so a year before we began. And we had to write reports for him. And of course, nowhere are they as well organized as in his German archive. I don't know, Alоїс, I think you came to Ukraine close to 50 times, 40 times, I don't know exactly, and stayed so much in all the conversations. And you pushed us.
Not to exaggerate, it was more than 100 times.
Oh, sorry. Okay. 100. Can you imagine that? 100 times. So you really pushed us. And, what we hear today, being mindful of the risks and a challenge to maintain the principles. Tarас Kicmey is, the pride of Lviv. He is the most successful, respected businessman in the city, I think. I don't know if there's maybe somebody that has more net worth, but nobody that is this successful and this respected. This was a real feast, a real bouquet. I promised that after each session, I would, and some of you have followed, so know, I would share some weakness of mine, some fault, some sin that I have before you and before the UKU community. And what I will mention now is somebody say, well, that's not so bad, but I think it is. And this is something I really come to realize now, although I knew it all along. During this COVID kind of lockdown and our, detention, so to speak, I had two physical accidents, which made it difficult for me to walk. And I have now 3 herniated discs in my neck from a car accident in July. And I had to begin physical therapy. In the meantime, I also listened to a doctor who in March told me to eat better and lose weight. And, I lost 24 pounds, which is like almost 12 kilos. And I started doing exercise. And the last of the sins that I shared during this 2-day conference is that I did not work hard on developing an awareness of physical fitness at UKU. sports, not competitive intercollegiate money-making sports, but the kind of sports that would make us feel as well as we can, given all the problems we have. And Father Bogdan has done better at this. He's kept in better shape, especially since he quit smoking. But he runs. He's strong. I mean, he can lift himself and run around the park, etc. And as our rectorate gets older, we realize that in our staff, the university gets older. We need these people. We need them for a while. UKU staff is not in the worst shape. Some cohorts of clergy in the US can constitute sumo wrestling teams. But I'm trying, like in good confession, I say, this is my sin, I'm sorry for it, and I promise to do better, and I am doing better. Because one UKU graduate, and this is what goes around, comes around, this is the radiation of UKU. Anatoly Nishtuk, some of our old timers know him. He lived as a student in my house because he was basically homeless. He had been a shoemaker before he came to the Lviv Theological Academy. He worked in a sweatshop, and when he was forced to pull when he was sewing together the shoes, he would pull the thread and his hands would bleed. And this kind of boy came to learn 3 years of Greek and 2 years of Latin, etc. At that time, he was a boxer. He finished UKU. He went on to the Mohila Academy, studied in the master's program of social work for 10 years, worked on very good projects. Last year, he won a 750 million euro grant for a rehabilitation center in Vinnytsia. But this year, he came to the US for certain personal reasons. And he didn't have a place to live. And he called me and I said, why don't you come here? One of the first things he did was at one of our banquets, this man from Ukraine, he gave $1,000 as a donation. But what he's been doing in the last 3 weeks, he's become my trainer because he's a boxer and he does these tortures with me. We call it the torture. After Vespers, before dinner, we have 40 minutes of exercise and conversation, because he installs doors now, and he tells me the stories of who he visited, the different Philadelphia Afro-American houses and etc., installing doors for Lowe's. And you know what? I'm going to go with him. I hope to install some doors, to see how other people live in the city. Anyway, that's my sin. This is the remedy for this session. Let me just say something about the balance, which Robert spoke about, a balancing of the tensions with courage. The Elan Vital of Teilhard de Chardin, which Professor Zanussi spoke of, the mindfulness of risk, and this global citizenship spreading, global citizens in, but global citizens who are in have to go out. And something very practical. Adrian, about 16 or 17 months ago, we sat almost next to each other, and between us sat John Jenkins, the president of Notre Dame University. And at that time, in our conversation at table, and then publicly, when I spoke from the pedestal, I promised I would tell the Pope that Catholic universities need to work together to create other Catholic universities. In parentheses, let me just put in figures, recent figures. The verity that you, Adrian, talked about, the true cost of a loss of ethics. We won't talk about 20th century wars, the genocides, the world wars. Why don't we mention the Iraq War? From 2003 to 2010, the full cost of the war is now being estimated at $2.4 trillion for the US. If UKU has spent 100 million, which it hasn't yet, it hasn't spent 100 million in the last 28 years. It's spending, 6 million annually on operating and then capital stuff. But I don't think it's 100 million total. It was 65 between 2010 and 2017. So about 100 million. Do you know that the war is if I'm not mistaken with my zeros, I think it's 24,000 times. Now, UKU is a low price tag. It would be erroneous to think you could do 24,000 UKUs from the beginning to about 26 years of existence. But in many countries, costs are even lower. And that's where Catholics need to be. 24,000 universities like this for the first 26 years. That is the true cost of a loss of ethics. And that is the question of also radiation or, replication. So I got a letter. I did speak to the Pope in July of 2019 about this. And I spoke to him. I was holding, there's that picture of we're drinking coffee together. That picture went around. Maybe somebody can quickly find it and put it in the chat. I told the Pope, he said, tell all these cardinals and everybody. And so I did. And then I wrote about it in September. And I was in Rome and I told some more people. Well, 10 months later, I got a letter, a response, which basically was a very nice letter from the Secretary of State. This is the #2 man in the Vatican. But they really didn't know what to do with this yet. But the conversation has begun. And it is like Professor Zanussi said, the university is the daughter of the Catholic Church. And my argument was precisely that it is a matter for tears that the Catholic Church, the mother, is often not in best relations with her daughter. And vice versa, the daughter is not the best relation with her mother. And we want to bridge that. And that's what UKU wants to do. And that's what I propose to Notre Dame University, that we work on this together. And I think it's still a very vital proposal. And it's a question of radiation and, let's say, multiplication and growth and in service, first of all, service, especially in the countries where the dollar goes a long way, maybe even farther than in Ukraine. And I want to maybe close with a proposal for all our panelists. You've seen some of the comments and you see the attention you have. And I think this is the best attended panel by a predominantly Ukrainian audience, despite the fact that it is in English. I think it's a real tribute to our speakers, to our moderator and our speakers. We need you. We need to hear you. We need this type of conversation. And the change managers need this. The ones you spoke about, Adrian, at the very beginning. Taras Kицmei is an honorary senator and still comes and serves on the Senate, but he's also a board member of the Polytechnic University, if I'm not mistaken.
University of Ivan Franko.
Oh, Ivan Franko. But you're a graduate of the Polytechnical. You have many connections there as well. So I want to propose that with the help of the speakers today, UKU do a series of seminars for change makers. By inviting, for example, university rectors to come for 3 days to UKU, maybe we can find some funding for this, although no university rector in Ukraine is poor. They could live in our collegium. They could meet with our friends with special needs. This could be done with some government officials. And I'm talking, I would invite the president. I say, President, there's nothing you can do more important than spend 3 days at UKU. Nothing that will give you more energy, revive you, etc. Maybe we could do this with a few bishops. They won't come to speak, to hear Bishop Boris Ґудзяк speak. I guarantee that. But they will come to listen to you. And we can, you know, some theater directors, some writers. We're only beginning to break into these fields. I think we're getting in and we're cracking through. But this has been the best gift that a birthday boy can have. This conversation, this fellowship, this witness, this prayer, this wisdom. And I think we can't just keep it to ourselves. I can't keep it to myself. And I hope we can share it. I sent to all of you, oh, there's somebody sent, you sent the moment I'm talking to the Pope about your university. Yeah, there it is. Oh, no, there's another one. Yeah, we're drinking coffee. Did you send that one? When we're drinking coffee? I can't open it right now, but anyway. I sent to everybody two expressions of my thanks. Gratitude has been, you know, kind of something that I've been focusing on. I've had over my bed in my room, Jacques Gniezdowski's, there you have it. That's when we're talking about radiating the university witness, the Catholic university witness. I've had Jacques Gniezdowski's beautiful woodcut before my eyes for decades. And that then became the motto of my logo. I say logo, not coat of arms, because it's a transformation. It's not a shield, which is a military thing. It's a Eucharistic cup. You see the two people who are in relationship. You see what some people think is the Trezub, but it's really a representation of the Trinity, which is a relationship of persons. All of this in the herb, that's the gratitude one. There's no more pleasing exercise of the mind. And the other one, if you can put the herb up there, our technologist, Natalia, can you do that? It says Eucharisto, which means thank you in Greek. That's how Greeks today say thank you. See at the bottom there. Is it cut off? Oh, well, I'm sorry, but you can make it out. There it is. Eucharisto. That's my word to you. Дякую.
Я маю функцію, роль завершити цю конференцію. Це сумна роль, тому що якраз найбільше зараз хочеться слухати. Думаю, що це загальне почуття, що маємо дуже цікаву розмову. І шкода її кінчати. Ми мали багато конференцій, особливо цей коронавірус. Він якось сприяє до вірусу конференції, бо Zoom – це легко, це дешево і таке всі інше. Я особисто мав 3 конференції цього тижня, але я вам скажу, що це найцікавіше, і напевно тільки це на тиждень, але може і на місяці, не більше. Ми мали дуже багато добрих доповідей, ми мали важливі доповіді, мали зворушливі доповіді, ми мали розумні доповіді, деякі доповіді для мене були откровенням. Скажімо, признаю, як нарешті прикладати sustainable українською мовою. Але чого ми не мали? Ми не мали жодної банальної доповіді, і ми не мали жодної скучної доповіді. Я думаю, що це найкращий знак нашої конференції. Я думаю, що це також знак нашого УКУ, католицького університету, що ми можемо такі конференції робити. Ми не хвалимося, ми просто хочемо це давати як модель. Ці конференції ширилися всюди, по всій Україні. І ми думаємо, що ці конференції якраз найбільше відображають дух самого владики. Бо від нього можна чути багато речей, але ніколи не скучних і ніколи не банальних. За це хочемо владику особисто подякувати, особливо подякувати вашій ювілеї. Ми старалися, як змогли, зробили це. Ми надіємося дуже, що десь до року вийдуть матеріали цієї конференції. Ми будемо звертатися до всіх учасників конференції, просити вас за ваші тексти. Про це буде окремий лист. А зараз просто хочу щиро, дуже щиро, глибоко від цієї душі подякувати всім учасникам, організаторам цієї конференції. І, владико, просити вас про молитву і про благословення.
May the Lord bless us. May He fill our hearts with gratitude, a recognition of the gift, of the beauty of fellowship, of the sacrament of each person, of the privilege to love and to serve. Нехай покров пречистої буде над нами. May the protection of the Mother of God accompany us as well as that of all the saints, your patron saints, your guardian angels. And may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, descend upon His whole world, the sick, the struggling, the lonely, the hungry, the poor, the desperate, the dying, those being born, those getting married today. May the blessing of the Lord descend upon the UKU community and all its friends, upon your families, upon you, and remain with you. Нехай благословення Господнє буде над вами, Отця і Сина, і Святого Духа. Амінь.